If you remember in LO1, I said that a theory in science always needs to be based on evidence. So here we're going to look at the evidence for evolution. First, we have fossils. Fossils are simply the remains or imprints of organisms that have been preserved, and if we actually have the remains, it's the most helpful, because then we can do further testing on them, like DNA testing and other things like finding out how old they are. We can figure out how old fossils are in two ways. First, we have relative dating, which is simply an estimate of the age. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see that there are various rock layers, and we would know the ages of these rock layers. And so if a fossil is found, let's say here, between 510 million years ago and 495 million years ago, then we know that the age of the fossil is somewhere within that range. So this is just estimating based on other things that we know. Radioactive or radiometric dating is using carbon-14 to actually measure how much it has decayed over time. Carbon-14 is present in all living organisms, and once something that is alive dies, the carbon-14 starts to radioactively decay, meaning it starts to actually lose pieces of its atoms, and then we can do some testing to calculate how long it's been decaying and therefore get its age. We have different kinds of fossils. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park, there's amber there. So amber is tree sap, and then things can get stuck in the tree sap and be fossilized that way. Mold fossils are simply imprints. So on the right here we have a trilobite, which is the Wisconsin state fossil, in case you are wondering. Cast fossils are mold fossils, like we saw in the previous slide, that got filled with minerals, and so then you end up with this 3D representation of the organism. There's a problem though. While fossils are excellent tools to help us see how organisms have evolved over time, a lot of the fossil record is incomplete. If you imagine a book, it would be like tearing out random pages of it. There's chunks of fossilized history that is missing. So we can't always use fossils as our only source of evidence for evolution. So we use other things. The second piece of evidence we can use is called comparative anatomy. We can study the structures of organisms and compare them and their ancestry and see how they may have evolutionarily come about. We have homologous, analogous, and vestigial structures that we will look at here. Homologous structures are found in organisms that have the same common ancestor. And so that structure has similar build. However, at this point, it may or may not be used for the same thing. An example, humans, cats, whales, and bats all have a common vertebrate ancestor, if you trace it back on a cladogram. We have our different limbs that serve different functions, but if you actually look at each limb anatomically, a lot of these bones, while it may not look like it to you, especially here, to a scientist that studies bones, they actually can tell that a lot of these bones are similar in structure. The radius and ulna on our arm are very similar to that of a cat, a whale, a bat, our carpals, our phalanges, etc. Anatomically, maybe they do different things at this point, but the structure is similar and we have the same origin. Same thing here, just another representation with a couple extra pictures. Analogous structures are the body parts of different organisms that have no similar ancestry whatsoever, but the structures basically do the same thing. So you have a wing in a bat, a moth, and a bird. They're all wings, they're all for flying, but a bat is a mammal, a moth is an insect, and a bird is a bird. So there's no common ancestor that had this wing function that was shared between all of them. Think of it this way. Homologous structures are similar because they were inherited. Might look differently, but overall the structure is similar. Analogous structures are similar not by relationship, but by other factors, whether it's environment or whatever. Similar structures, similar functions, but not related whatsoever. Vestigial structures are structures or organs that don't really have a function anymore. At one point they used to, but throughout the history of evolution, that function got lost, and for some reason, that feature hasn't really gone away yet. Who knows, maybe hundreds, thousands of years down the line, it'll disappear. But for now, we have these remnants. The appendix, tailbone, wisdom teeth, if you can wiggle your ears, those muscles, they don't really serve a purpose in us anymore. However, in the past they may have. Think of dogs and cats and animals with big ears. They can control the way that their ears point to help them hear better. Well, we can't really do that because of where our ears are placed on our head, and we don't really need to. So those muscles, which were from a common ancestor a long time ago, just have not evolutionarily disappeared yet. Our third source of evidence for evolution is studying how embryos and organisms develop. We can look at the patterns of growth from an embryo into a larger organism, and we find that the way that organisms develop is actually similar in organisms that are related. These are all the embryos you can see of a fish, a reptile, a bird, and a human. We all have had gill slits and tails, so actually when you were developing, you did have gills and a tail at one point, and then obviously over time, those developed away as you became who you are today. But because we are all vertebrates and we have, you can see here, a backbone, we all develop in a similar way. So studying embryos and development is a way to help us understand evolution even better. Lastly, we can compare DNA sequences. And we can assume that the more closely related an organism is, the more likely they are to have had a common ancestor. Again, this does not mean that we evolved from monkeys. That is completely untrue. It just means that somewhere down the line, a long, long time ago, the theory of evolution states that there was a common ancestor that continually underwent speciations, and chimps and apes and gorillas and all that went one way and humans went another way, and because of our common ancestry, we share a large portion of our DNA. We are 92% similar in terms of DNA to a mouse. You would not have somebody say that we evolved from mice. 92% is still pretty high. So again, common ancestor. Fruit fly, 44%, yeast, plants. You can see that we can use DNA to study evolutionary relationships. In your note packet, we are doing an activity next that is an all-class activity. So in your note packet says that I'll take your notes if you're done, and you can just continue to work ahead on your semester exam review while you wait for everybody to do this discussion. You don't need to have it done in order to complete your review or anything like that. If you have any questions, as always, please see me, and good luck as you prepare for your semester exam.